Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. Bryan, who was being sought for the abduction of two girls in Bath, calls for more focus on the teaching of history in light and later in sports. Wendy's women have to wait to see if they advance in Women's World Cup. I'm Shane Masters and here are the news in detail. Reactions this afternoon to news that Bryan, who was being sought for the abduction of two girls in Bath, St. Thomas in October last year, has been nabbed by the police. TVJ News was informed that Mr. Bryan was held last night in the community of Durham in Portland. Our reporter Krista Campbell is in St. Thomas and filed this report.
We arrived to the expected celebration in Bath, St. Thomas, where people say they now feel like they can walk more freely on the streets now that Bryan has been captured.
I feel good about it because I'm on evening shift. I attend the Seaford High School, and at evening time, night would catch me on the road, so I would have to call someone, like my mother or my father, to meet me outside on the main road to bring me on the lane because the lane is dark at night time.
I'm happy me have a clap me on this man here. So me have praise God and thank you. Because I fearless to go to work. I work and I work the same today. So me fearless I am. Now me say come back again with it. I'm afraid to say I want me out there work and the man will see me and will live with me.
It's a good feeling and feel so great in get capture. But just one thing. A nigger should have catch him. You understand? I'm not really preach death upon nobody still in a body. Death to me is not really a punishment. Him should have really get some real punishment.
But here on the lane where the first abduction took place, no celebrations just yet. We spoke to 9-year-old Felicia Crusher's mother.
We're still in fear. I see them all picture. Them have a show. We need to see picture him now. To see how him look. And where you catch him and how you catch him.
We can't say them capture him. We don't have a proof of that. The bingo here, we have to depend on bingo. If we need a rest. I can't sleep. We have a sleepless night. From this happened 10 hours, sleepless night.
Now the police in Portland did confirm that they have indeed captured Bryan during an operation last night. But as the day progresses, we expect more information about this developing story. Reporting from Bath in St. Thomas, I'm Krista Campbell.
Another warning to party promoters to obey the law as they go about planning their events. More in this report from Dwayne Anderson.
Patrons and promoters are reveling in the return of normalcy in the entertainment sector, with several events already staged and many others planned for the coming weeks. The police say they are not here to stop anyone's fun, but they are reminding stakeholders to remember the cutoff times.
We have asked the promoters to somewhat change the culture of these events. So we ask that persons come out even earlier. So when it comes to the cutoff time, we do not have any challenges.
Party promoters were also warned to submit their applications 10 days before the event so that the police can do their security assessment. There have been multiple cases across the island of individuals being targeted by gunmen while they were at unapproved parties.
Now, what we are saying to promoters, partygoers, this is not a free-for-all. The industry is regulated, and we're asking persons to go through the proper application process, apply early for us to do an investigation, and we will take it from there.
There are also issues to iron out around the discounts announced by the government, in particular the party permit fees that have been cut by 50% for the first 6 months of the reopening of the entertainment industry. No specific date was set for when that discount would come into effect. It is one of the issues stakeholders in Clarendon met to iron out on Tuesday.
The starting of the 6 months period, we did not agree to because we were not getting any permit as at the date the opening was announced. So for me, the 6 months period could not have been started then because that wouldn't be of benefit to us.
In terms of the way forward, what are some of the arrangements?
The president of the Clarendon Party Promoters Association said his members also welcome the attempts to improve the efficiency involved in getting parties approved.
That the CEO himself has announced a one-stop shop, which we would have discussed during the pandemic period because we had meetings And we really appreciate that, because the back and forth from parish council to police, then to the fire department and all of that, it was really hectic.
Dwayne Anderson, TVJ News.
More reaction this afternoon to the royal tour in Jamaica, which ends later today. Two key stakeholders argued that the response from the public to the royal visit by Prince William and his wife Kate is evidence that history teaching in Jamaica has failed. The issue was discussed on TVJ's All Angles last night. Sandra Williams reports.
Director of Center for Reparation Research, Professor Vereen Shepherd, is not particularly fond of the royal tour. She argues that it signifies a sad day in Jamaican history and that Jamaica is still a colonial space. Images have been circulating in the media showing snippets of Prince William and his wife Kate visiting several places, including Culture Yard in Trenchtown, the Shortwood Practicing Primary and Junior High School, and the Shortwood Teachers College. Professor Shepherd says the depiction in some of the images is disappointing.
When our little ones who were trying to educate away from a colonial education would stand and greet people with a flag of a country that is not. That's not our flag. Why weren't they given Jamaican flags if they had to wave a flag? Our attitudes have shown, many of our attitudes are pro-colonial, and therefore I think it's in keeping with that members of the royal family feel comfortable coming to Jamaica, because they realize that for the most part, they'll get a welcome.
Some citizens have expressed that they have no issue with the tour and even questioned the demand for reparative justice.
I feel really good about it because Jamaica as a country was brought about through the English. That's hence the reason we're an English-speaking country. So it's not a bad thing. It's neither here or there for me.
We talk about repatriation and the British owes us. I don't know how somebody can be owing you after 60 years. And for us to be sitting down and talking about repatriation is nonsense.
There is, a certain amount of despair that I feel in seeing the responses of the public, in seeing how it is that the lack of understanding of the significance of history in the present, without understanding the fact that these people trafficked Africans across the Atlantic, worked them, many of them to death, profited, and in the process made us poor.
Senior lecturer in gender and development studies at the University of the West Indies, Dr. Maziki Thame, reasons that there is a breakdown of the teaching of Jamaican history and that it needs to be addressed.
The part of the failure is that we are not centering ourselves. We are not thinking about what it means to be who we are and what the demands of being who we are require. The way in which we treat our language, the way in which we treat children in the classroom is reinforcing colonial ideas about what they are good for, and that we don't, or, aspirations for them are not high.
Sandy Williams.
District constables attached to the Ministry of Education this morning took industrial action by staging a sit-in over a salary dispute. When we visited the ministry this morning, we were informed that the district constables were locked in a meeting. This morning, we observed that the post to the entrance of a main building at the ministry that's usually manned by a district constable was being manned by ministry staff. Shortly after, they emerged from the meeting, but efforts to get a comment from them about what transpired resulted in a reporter, Kirkwright, who was filming, being asked to leave the compound.
No, you can't go inside the building.
Why? Me have business at the ministry?
No, you're not doing no business in the building.
Really?
Yep. What kind of business you're doing in the building?
I'm going to ask.
You're continuing recording, sir. You have to leave now, sir. Sir, you have to leave the compound. You have to leave the compound. Sir, you have to leave the compound.
Oh, so you're saying I can't do business in the ministry?
Sir, you're videoing.
I'm asking if I can't do business in the ministry, sir. I'm asking you. What's your name, sir? What's your name, sir? What's your name, sir?
Sir,
And it's time for a break here on the Midday News. Stay with us. More stories when we return. Welcome back to the Midday News. While thousands of students returned to face-to-face classes recently, Those at the Caribbean Christian Centers for the Deaf have been back in the physical classroom since last year. The school, which caters to the deaf community, was given a special exemption because of the unique challenges posed by the pandemic. Jamaica Maitland has the details.
Classes are in session at the Caribbean Christian Center for the Deaf, and it has been so since October last year. So when the government announced the reopening of all schools, they were already way ahead. And like most schools, the students are making up for lost time due to the pandemic. But these students have a unique challenge. They're deaf.
There was significant learning loss because of COVID-19. Now, while students were using the Zoom platform, it required visuals for them to learn.
When you are using Zoom, if my internet becomes unstable, I shut off my video and I just depend on the audio. Our students don't have that option.
The school also has a residential program. Terrian Bernard is the principal of the institution. She explained that usually students could go home on intervals. However, since they've reopened, a tough decision was made only to allow them to leave at the end of the school term. Ms. Bernard says every time students would go home, the school would be in isolation for 2 weeks.
They want to see their family, and we kind of want them to see their family. It's a good emotional support for them. So it was difficult to make that decision at first to keep them here. They're here for like 3 months without seeing their family. It was hard. But at the time and what we have access to and the cost of COVID testing, if we had them do that before they come back, we just thought it would have been more efficient.
Since being back at school, students have had to adhere to protocols, including mask wearing. But that too is a challenge. Masks block expression.
Parts of the language are on the face as much as it is on the hands. So you find that we kind of develop protocols to navigate that. Sometimes it means that in a group setting, we take turns with speakers being able to remove their masks so their full expression and signing body language is visible, and then
She says despite the challenges, the students are performing well, and the return of face-to-face classes to increase access to education for deaf children is a good sign. Jamaica Maitland, TVJ News.
Gunmen struck in Westmoreland last night, leaving a man and a woman dead. About 10 last night, residents of Nompril Road in Negril heard explosions and called the police. The bodies of the two victims were found beside a motorcycle with bullet wounds. Investigators say the man was a bike taxi operator and that the woman was a passenger. No motive has been established for the attack. Meanwhile, the Area 1 police are probing the fatal shooting of a businessman in Hanover last evening. The businessman was at his liquor store when two men entered and opened gunfire on him. He was pronounced dead at hospital. And here's Cody and Barrett with the Business Minute.
The latest Jamaica Living Conditions survey shows that local households have been consuming less. The findings for 2019 were released yesterday.
At the national level, nominal mean per capita consumption expenditure was $370,853. The Greater Kingston metropolitan area continues to hold a notable lead in spending over other urban centers and rural areas. When we compare with 2018, in real terms, consumption of goods and services declined nationally.
In news overseas, according to new data, the cost of living in Russia is surging following the country's invasion of Ukraine. Official figures show price of some household staples, such as sugar, have jumped by as much as 14% over the past week. Inflation is set to keep rising in Russia, where the ruble has fallen sharply since the Ukraine war began, pushing up the cost of importing goods. And that's it for the Business Minute. I'm Cody Ann Barrett.
Time now for the top regional and international stories with Sandy Williams.
In the region, the Pan American Health Organization, PAHO, is calling for urgent investment in resources, support, care, and information for the fight against tuberculosis. The call comes as the COVID-19 pandemic reverses gains made against one of the world's deadliest infections. In a message ahead of today's World Tuberculosis Day, PAHO said on a daily basis more than 70 people die and 800 fall ill from tuberculosis in the Americas, including the Caribbean. It said while efforts to combat the disease have saved more than 1.2 million lives in the region since 2000, yearly deaths have increased by an estimated 3,000 in 2020 due to interruptions in essential services. On the international scene, Ukrainian's President Vladimir Zelensky has claimed that Russian forces are using phosphorus, which is killing adults and children. And those were the top regional and international stories. I'm Sandy Williams. On the international scene.
And we head to a quick break. When we come back, Simon Preston will have your midday sports report.
Welcome back. It's now time for Midday Sports. I'm Simon Preston. At sports time, England were struggling at 60 for 6 against the West Indies on day one of the third test in Grenada. Zach Crawley, Joe Root, Dan Lawrence, Ben Stokes, Alex Lees and Johnny Bairstow all departed for the visitors for 7, a duck, 8, 2, 31 and a duck respectively. Carl Mears and Alzara Joseph have taken 2 wickets each. The first two test matches ended in drawn results. Meanwhile, the West Indies women will have to wait on other results to see if they will advance to the semi-finals of the Women's Cricket World Cup in New Zealand following a no result against South Africa earlier today.
Persistent rain in Wellington reduced the match to a 26-over-a-side contest. Batting first, South Africa reached 61 for 4 after 10.5 overs before the rain came again as both teams shared the points. The point puts the Caribbean side third in the table on 7 points, while South Africa moves up to 9 and qualifies for the last 4.
I think that we can still take a lot positive from this first group stage. I mean, we've played good cricket, just that it's just certain stages when it comes to batting that some we did not put good runs on the board. But I mean, like, there's still a lot of positives to take from the first half.
And personally for you, the West Indies will have to hope that either India doesn't beat South Africa or England doesn't beat Bangladesh for them to advance to the semi-finals.
To football we go now as the Reggae Boys will be searching for their first win in the final round of World Cup qualifying for the first time since 2001 as they host El Salvador at the National Stadium this evening. The Reggae Boys, who are out of contention to qualify for the 2022 World Cup, are 7th in the table on 7 points, while El Salvador are 6th on 9 points. Kickoff is at 6:05 Jamaica time. At 8:05 Panama battles Honduras, while at 9 o'clock Mexico battles the USA. At 9:05 Costa Rica plays Canada. And finally this afternoon, Reggae Girls goalkeeper Sydney Schneider signed with National Women's Soccer League club Kansas City Current on a 1-year deal with an option to extend it a further year until 2023. This move ends the 22-year-old's 14-month spell with the Washington Spirit. Schneider was drafted by the Spirit last year, but she did not feature for the club, who went on to win the title. Schneider has made 18 appearances for the Reggae Girls since her debut in 2018. She was also a member of Jamaica's squad at the 2019 FIFA Women's World Cup in France. And that is it for your Midday Sports Report. I'm Simon Preston. Ashane, it's over to you.
Thanks, Simon, and that's the Midday News. I'm Ashane Masters. Join us at 7 for Prime Time News. On behalf of the news, sports and production teams, have a good afternoon.